And getting this out, you have to bend these tangs. All right, folks, welcome back. This video 2 on the Magna carbs, or the Magna project. We're going to be focusing on the carbs in this episode. These are 51As if anybody's interested, and if you look at the other videos, which I'll link in the description, I go over in pretty good detail the difference between the Sabre and the Magna carbs of this era, so I'm not going to cover them in this video. Again, you have to watch those videos. I don't remember which one of the videos it's in, but it is in there where I go over the differences in the spring lengths, differences in the needles on the slides. And that's the first thing we're going to start with on these is the slides. Normally I go to the bottoms of the carbs and take them apart and see what we got. But on these, I know what I got because they're mine. And I was into them last time. I know we got those seized slow jets. So we're going to deal with those. But ultimately, we're going to tear these completely to bits. We're going to take them down because they are really dirty. So this would be 1 and 3 and then 2 and 4. So we're going to start with the tops. Take the slides out. That way I can hard tag these carbs with the little metal tags right out of the gate, basically. As far as racking goes, and if you watch the VFR 750 videos, I talk about the differences with the 3 long studs that go through. On those, there is no long studs. How they're, quote unquote racked together is the air box itself. And there's 8 screws in here, 2, 4, 6, 8 for the 4 carbs. Those screws are pretty nasty and rounded off and not in good shape. And that's my fault because originally when I did these carbs, I didn't have JIS tools. And I think they had been gone into before, if memory serves. So I'm replacing those screws. In fact, I put a pretty big order into Partzilla last night. I have all the gaskets and O-rings, but I put in like for screws and little bits like that I thought I would need, including those 8 screws up here. We'll replace those. I think I changed these funnels out last time. This is what seals the air box. The seal is built in on a little kind of a feature on the bottom of the funnels, which I'll show you. Go look at those other videos that I'm going to link to in the description on the previous Magna carb work, and that really goes into a lot of detail on the carbs, which I am, again, not going to cover in this video. We're going to buzz through this pretty quick, and I'm not going to even tear into the float bowls and the jets and stuff until they're all taken to bits. Atypical for me, but I know what I'm dealing with here. Let's get it done. We'll start with number 3, and I do have to separate these springs. Spring length is different on the rear carbs from the front carbs. They are different. All right, folks, I'm just going to go ahead and shove something in right here. Yes! In regards to the springs and the needles, now if you're working on one of these and you're looking at the service manual for the 82 and 83 years, you're going to have some conflicting information. I wanted to try to clarify that. It is in the other videos. I kind of go over it in greater detail than I can right now. Now, if you're looking at the service manual is going to say there are differences in the slide needles as far as the thinner needles versus thicker needles and spring length, and it'll indicate the Sabre model only, and that is incorrect. It's partially correct. On the Sabre models, 2 of the carbs have thinner slide needles and 2 of them have standard. On the Magna carbs, the slide needles are all exactly the same. And you can verify that from the parts fiche. The part numbers are the same for all 4 slide needles. But likewise, on the parts fiche, you can identify that the spring length on the Magnas are different. So the service manual is right and it's wrong. There's 2 sections in the service manual right next to each other in the carb section that contradict each other. The first one shows Sabre only. The next one shows make sure that you put the correct slide springs and needles in the correct carbs, and it doesn't say Sabre only again. So just be careful with this. Net sum, the longer springs on the Magna go in the front carbs, the 2 and 4 carbs. The shorter springs go in the 1 and 3 carbs. And a kind viewer out in the previous videos that the reason why is because the front carbs are downdraft, or pretty much laying sideways. So they need stronger or longer springs to accommodate for that, whereas the back springs in the rear cylinders are pretty much vertical. So they got Sir Isaac Newton helping them a little bit in the gravity department. So I just wanted to clarify that in case you're working on one, because it can be a little confusing. So we'll have to separate these springs. I'll get a baggie going. What I'm mainly interested in looking at right now is to re-inspect these slide diaphragms. The diaphragms were replacements from the original that I did years ago from JBL Industries or JB Industries, something like that. They're still around, and they make really nice replacement diaphragms and other rubber bits for carburetors. And I had the slide diaphragms, and they had started to deteriorate. But I had a rack of Sabre carbs, and I hadn't really done anything with them except pilfer parts from them. So I'll inspect all these slides off camera and make sure that they're okay. Number 3's looks really well, really good. And so let me move on from there. I'm gonna go ahead and get all the tops off to report back any unusual findings, and then I'll get the carbs hard tagged. All right, we are all hard tagged. I shot a clip on number 1 here, but it got screwed up by my fat fingers. So I just stuck the slide back in. I want to show you something. Take a look at this edge right there. See how it's a little deformed. When I first took the cover off number 1, it was kind of folded in a little bit, and you can see a little witness mark on that rubber where it wasn't seated properly. And that was my mistake. When I put this back together last time, I must have missed that somehow. It must have just gotten slightly pinched, kind of like that. And if that's the case, and we had a little vacuum leak in it, so I'm thinking that's probably the cause of our problem with hard acceleration. If that diaphragm's not reacting enough or at the same speed as the other ones, based on, you know, there's a little difference, of course, in each cylinder, we have to assume that this has something to do with it. The other 3 are fine. And it was an intermittent problem, and it was very mild. Originally, when I did these and switched these over from that Sabre rack I was mentioning before, all of them were like compromised, some worse than others. And that thing really had a problem under hard acceleration, but still ran pretty good. Essentially, we're mimicking the same problem, but on a much less aggressive or less significant scale, which would be really classic to have one cylinder that was not happy in certain throttle positions. And I think that's what we're dealing with right here. So I got to be doubly sure when we put these together that that's right. And my mistake. So hopefully, it may have been that way to start with. Maybe it was installed improperly on another carburetor and it's assumed that position. So I shall make sure, doubly make sure that number 1 is put back in properly when we put these back together. But I wanted to show you that. Now I'm going to show you something real quick here. I mentioned in the VFR carbs. You remember on that center bracket that goes between the carbs, there's a little hole, and it allows the float ball, or the float pin rather, on whatever the carb that was, to go through so you can get the float out, because otherwise that bracket rather would keep the float pin from moving. Well, this has a similar situation. The engineers, I should say Imagineers, they consider this when they put these things together. And there's 2 features in this one. I don't remember which one does which, but there's a hole here, and then there's a half circle hole here. I think it's this half circle one. So for number 2 carb right here, if you were going to take the float out, take the bowl off, you want to slide that pin sideways, it would hit this linkage. So you kind of rotate this up until that feature lines up to that. I'm not going to do it in situ here because I'm going to take them apart later. Just run it over to this little clearance spot. It'll come out all the way. Take your pin out or your float pin and then just release it. And then you can do what you need to do. All right, let's buzz these apart. I got the linkages taken off, at least one side of each linkage. These are so simple. It's a no-brainer. Very easy. So we're just going to spin these out if they come out because the screws are pretty screwed up, but that's a JIS number 3 bit, so hopefully it'll work. Oh yeah, baby. I need to go with a longer bit holder. Hell, that's at least 8 inches. Well, it's 8 inches to me. All right, beauty. Whoa.
Ah, fuck.
Yeah, that was one that I thought was going to give us trouble. Nope. Well, that one I got. I'll get back to that one. All of them are slotted. I forgot I did that. Ugh, crap. Okay, so what do you do in a situation like this? Well, there's a couple things you can do, and I don't know what. First thing is to find a screwdriver that actually fits in the slot that you made. Oh boy, that's tight. Let me try one other thing for power. Do it under power. It's stuck and ain't gonna go that way. Just, you gotta be careful doing this, but probably your only hope. I wish I had replaced them screws. There it goes. I just had to get a little bit more He-Man with it. It just needs new screws, which it's going to get. I'll get this apart here and lift it off when I get all the screws out of the way. You don't need to see that part. And then see the whole thing fall, kind of and then you'll really get an idea what you're dealing with. Now, if you're interested in what this is, it's just a cover for the breather. The breather tees just penetrate up through here, so that they don't hook to any hoses. This is just a grommet that they go through. And there are pins. There's locating pins. There it goes. So once those breathers free up from those grommets, that's usually what's holding it on these. Because otherwise there's nothing else. There's just nothing else holding it. But this is how it seals on the back side of it. It's just like I said, it's got that little lip on those funnels. So these would line up to these grooves on the inside here. They are listed as CMS NL. So I don't know if I got them directly from CMS or if I got them from some other source. Maybe an eBay source, I don't remember. But I guess maybe they are available, or they were at least at one time. So let's set this aside. As you notice, this already has the aluminum fuel tees because I replaced these years ago. I was trying to remember the name of the place, and I mentioned in the VFR video, went out of business, and I think V4 Dreams or maybe a couple of different places bought out their stock. It was called V4 Market, and it was up in Connecticut. And they had a lot of good stuff. That's where I got these originally. These are all like TIG welded. They're really nice aluminum fuel tees. If I was to make these, I'd have to do a little bigger center section so I could put a spigot in. But there's not, again, a whole lot of real estate in here. So if you can find a set of these that are welded like that, I would have replaced the plastic ones in a heartbeat with them. Don't worry about the springs if they pop out. That's why I got a pan here. I don't really care if they pop out or not. There it goes, just stuck. And now, since I've already disconnected the linkage down in here.
Makes me yawn.
Come on. There's your number one carb right there.
That was easy.
Yeah, this is your base carb because it's non-adjustable. So this is the one you synchronize all the others off of. All right, we're all pulled apart here. All these little linkages and so forth are held in with a cotter pin. These tiny, tiny, tiny cotter pins are sometimes difficult to find. Now, if you go down to your local Ace Hardware, and you got those bins, these are about the smallest ones that you can get. Let's see if we can get it in a camera. There we go. These little cotter pins, they're a little longer than what you need. Normally, they're just a little bit too big for these holes, like a typical linkage like this. So if we try to shove one through here, it wants to start, but it's just a little bit too big. So if you can't find the tiny, tiny cotter pins that go with them, I like to use these. And all you got to do is just run a slightly bigger drill bit through. And then these will fit. And you make sure they're a little long. So you cut off the length of them after you bend them over so they don't hook on anything. But these work really well. And the heads of them are pretty comparable to the original ones as far as the size goes. So you won't have any problem with that. So Ace Hardware has enough. That's what I'll end up using. So let's start with number one. And we'll take that off. Float bowl off. I want to see about that jet situation. Strip the innards and take a look at that. Get a really good idea of what the hell's going on with that. I want to get this out of the way too. We don't need this idle adjuster in the way. Since this is number one's cab, I also took the little bracket off of the Enricher cable restraint. It's in here as well. Okay, so numero uno. And these are different lengths. On these particular float bowls, there are different length carb screws, so you got to be mindful of that. Some are shallower and some are deeper, depending on the features of the threads in which they go through. So this is not atypical at all. So just keep in mind that that's why I'm going to bag these up individually, rather than throw them all into one like I did on the tops, because those are exactly the same. See, they're clean. I knew that. I knew they were in good shape. We're going to replace all these anyway because I got new ones. As far as the float bowl gaskets go, shove it in number one. What the hell?
What the hell?
And we're going to replace the floats too. As I said in the VFR video, I have new floats. You know what? Let's take a look at one of those. Let's make sure they're right. That's these Too Fast Moto jobs I showed you in the VFR video. I really like those. They seem to be really, really nice. for Taiwanese crap. And remember, these are adjustable. They have the metal tang, whereas the other ones are not. Man, I mean, look at this. They're like right. I don't like the pins, just kind of zinc-plated metal. I'll probably, again, use the original pins. These gas fumes are probably screwing up my brain. Let's toss that over there. Get this out. Yeah, that's something else you can check. Believe it or not, I have found these bent in carburetors before. You lay them across something flat like your kitchen counter or something when your wife's not looking, and just roll them around and make sure they're straight. Yeah, the float needles are, I know I have these. I'm certain I have these. These are aftermarket, but they worked in this application just fine. But to be honest with you, these look pretty nice so far, at least this one. I'm not going to deal with that right now. It's not a big concern to me. The biggest concern is why, you see, when I tried to get these out before, you see how flared out that is. I just don't understand why these damn things are so seized in there, because I'm going to replace at least the slow jets for sure. I believe they are 38s. Take the main out and get it out of the way first. You have a press-in Enricher jet, so Enricher slow, main, and your seat for your float, which is removable as opposed to other ones that are pressed in and has a little crush washer, which I don't have. You can reuse these in some applications, but when we pressure test it before it goes back together, I might bang together another one of those little tools, unless the one I made already works, the one I did in the VFR carb. Shove it in there, put your finger over it, make sure that thing seals off. That rules that out right out of the gate. Let's hit it with a screwdriver, start with, like we normally would. Let me get my regular screwdriver for it, unless we can use this big one because it's kind of spread out anyway. I mean, they are just stuck. Anyway, the first thing that you would do with this, it's kind of dangerous here because if you slip, you whack this, is to tap it. I'm going to replace the jet anyway. Oh, man, that is stuck. All right, so let's try a little heat. Let me blow these out. I should probably clean out before I do some open flame. Hang on. And try a little heat first. Decent amount here. May have tried this the last time, but I didn't want to do anything rash. This aluminum just wicks the heat up like fast. Oh my God, these are just seized. Oh, there it goes. Got it. Ah. A little heat, a little more heat probably than I tried before. Alrighty. See how it's just, these jets are just not in good shape now. They've been abused by a human. We're going to replace them. And these are, like, I can see that. Yep, 38. Threads in there look good. So that's the secret here. We're going to tappy tap tap on it a little bit. You work in steps. Tappy tap tap. Be careful of the standoff of the main and the emulsion. And then if that don't work, then we got to hit it with some heat. We got to get them out. So I'm going to replace these. So I'm going to go order 4 of these 38s. I don't think I have any. These are 40s. Brand new. KN Pilot Jet. KHN D64s. I believe that is exactly the style. Yep. I don't know if I want to do that and throw a 40 in. There's no reason. So I'm going to have to order some. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Go on a place like nichecycle.com. I think it's Niche Cycle. There's a Niche Industries, that's different, but Niche Cycle in St. Pete, you'll find it. You just measure certain features of the jet, and then you go on there and make sure you line them up as far as measurements go. Just go into the KN jetting. They're not terribly expensive, and they're really good jets. All right, I ordered 8 of them. They're exactly like this. They are the N424-21 series /38s instead of 40. They measure up to the right length, which is 28 millimeters long. The threads are going to be right if it's a K-hen, but it's got 38s in it now. It runs fine, so I'm not going to mess with that. I want to show you one thing on these old carbs regarding the Enricher. Now we're going to get the Enricher plunger out, but it isn't as easy as it sounds. And the reason why is because this thing has got these little forks right here that it grabs the plunger and pushes it out via the linkage that it's attached to. And getting this out, you have to bend these tangs. I haven't figured out any other way to do that. There may be a way to do it that I've never noticed before. What? Hang on. If this thing swung out further, in other words, did this, it'd probably rotate out of the way enough so we could just unscrew it in situ and this thing would get out of the way. No, it sure doesn't. It just doesn't, it doesn't clear. Now maybe these, because it's bent, because I bent them before. I'm looking at this the wrong way. Here's the solution. This plastic piece should slide out that way and give you plenty of clearance. That's the secret to it. And it just dawned upon me after all the times I've done carb. Well, I haven't really experienced this on any other carb except these, but let's get some silicone spray to help us out. If this works, then we both learned something. I'm not screwing around with you. I've had to bend those before to get these things out. I couldn't figure out another way to do it. What if we push the plastic up like that? It'll go. Yeah, look at that. Now you take the plastic out and it frees up some space here. I never considered that. I bet you if these weren't all bent up from me doing it before, they would probably work. There it goes. Yep. Son of a gun. So that's how it works. So you see that we took that plastic tube out, which allows this to move around a little bit, and if these ends weren't so messed up by yours truly, you know who. Well, I didn't know that. I honestly just thought of it. So that's the way you do that, to take those out. All right, I'm working on number 2 right now, and let me show you the float from number 1. Last batch of videos I did on this Magna, the ones that I'm going to link to in the description, I found a float that had gas inside of it. And remember I mentioned in the VFR carb videos, the reason why I changed the floats, inevitably, they get microscopic, and I said it just like that, cracks in them, and then the floats fill up with fuel, and then they get heavy, and they don't operate properly. So if you have heavy float, it's harder for it to come up. The carburetor will essentially have too high or an artificially high fuel level, and that carburetor is going to run rich. Now the reason why there's different colors between this one and this one is this is one of the original floats. I had 4 Sabre carbs, which took the exact same floats. This is one of those. And the problem with one of the 4 was that it was cracked. There was a crack in it or something, like one of these arms was cracked. So I couldn't use it. And so I took the best of the 4 original ones and then put it back in. And this is one that came out of 2, this dark colored one here. But listen to this. I don't know if you can hear it. See how wet this is still? I can feel it and I can hear it. Let's go do our weighing thing again, and we'll put it on the scale, see the difference in the weight. There's the one that came from the Sabre carbs that does not have any fuel in it. 0.25 ounces, 0.28 ounces. Doesn't seem like much, but most definitely fuel in it. I can hear it and I can feel it sloshing around. These are exactly the same floats. I checked the parts fishers, I'd say, between the 2, the Sabre and the Magna. They take the same exact floats. You can even feel it. You can feel the difference in weight on this. There's another big problem right there. So it was a really good idea that I think I had to just go ahead and order brand new floats on those ones I showed you before, the same ones I used in the VFR. Interesting finding, and I had thought about this. When the thing was misbehaving, even a number of months ago, I was thinking, I wonder if that float is compromised, because we had 1 or 2 in the original. This is one of the originals. Do the same thing. I wonder if now that last one is compromised as well. And it sure as hell was. Well, while we do the carbs on the side, do the ultrasonic, clean those up, wait for some more parts to come in, let's address the oozing issue on this coolant crossover. It's not a bypass, a crossover from one side of the block to the other. This main crossover, you got a cap here, a cap there. And I've obviously taken them off. I gave them a rough cleaning, just lightly scraped them. And I know for a fact the last time I did this, these are nice and flat. I checked them for flatness.
That's bullshit.
And these were perfectly clean. And I mean, they were just spotless, perfect clear aluminum. See some discoloration where that O-ring sat. The only way that's going to get there, in my opinion, is if you're getting some coolant underneath there to do that. And that would be on the outside of where the O-ring sits. Now, how would that happen? So this is the pipe that comes right off the water pump. It goes from a flexible hose to this chrome one, and then up into the cap, which again, I'll show you here in a second. This is the cap that would go in here. It would slip down on a seal that goes onto the chrome pipe and seal off. That's never leaked. It's always done well. This is the way that thing looks. So you have an O-ring groove in this casting, and then it goes down the flat surface here. Now, if you look at that flat surface, this one's even got a little bit more discoloration area, especially toward the front there. And I'm thinking to myself, why in the hell would that happen? So I really took a good look at the ones that came off of this engine here. And so we're going to do some machining on them to make them a little bit better. I've already done one. All right, so here's the finished product. I ended up facing this nice and flat, and I took 10 thou off of it. Now the problem I found with this, and I'll show you on the next one that I have chucked up, there was a variation in the edges. But on this one, when I ran the indicator across it, this outside edge was higher than the inside edge by a certain amount, and it varied around the whole piece. This is not the easiest thing to indicate in because it's not central to the spindle. You gotta kind of just chuck it in, and I found that the 4-jaw probably wouldn't help me, so I'm using the 3-jaw. And I had a clearance issue on this side too, because I had to, that's why I'm using a boring bar for that. So what I ended up doing was I just kind of took an average of it when I indicated it in, and then just faced it. And I took 10 thou off, and it cleaned it up perfectly. So I'm real happy with the way they came out. So I'm certain that this is flat. So net sum, I believe that these are a little warped. And the depth of that O-ring groove is pretty significant. If I show you an O-ring, I have one that came out of the other motor, I'll show you. And it just, you know, this of course is cut already, but you get the idea. This has got to be proud of the surface at least somewhat. And if this isn't flat, and I know the block is flat, and I know for a fact the last time I did this, these are nice and flat. I checked them for flatness.
That's bullshit.
That's bullshit.
I'm thinking that that's probably the cause of it. So taking 10 thou off does two things. First of all, it flattens that surface perfectly. And secondly, it gives us a little bit more crush on this O-ring because it's 10 thousandths closer to the bottom of the O-ring now. Kind of see the center, so you know that's the center of it. You bring the cutter up to that and you know you got the whole thing. So that looks pretty good. We cleaned the whole thing up, and now we're going to take another 5. Okie doke, let's see how we did. And that's a nice surface finish right there. Let me tell you what, that looks perfect. And I'm confident that that was the problem. I'm confident that these both were a little bit off, and we're gonna have just that little bit more crush on that O-ring. And I am gonna use some Honda Bond HT. I'll just use a little brush and brush them in the groove, put the O-ring in, put a little bit on the case, on the crankcase where that goes. Got to be that. It's got to be these things. The crankcase, the block is not twisted. It's not cracked that I can tell. These are nice and flat. I checked them for flatness.
That's bull.
Okay, the crossover between two sides of the block is completed. I did paint these, cleaned up the chrome connector piece, and it never leaked there anyway. It was always leaking at the block here, one side or the other. Now, speaking of the leak here at the block, you already saw what I did with facing down these caps 10 thou and making sure they were perfectly flat. Made some assumptions that the block was flat too from previous encounters with this.
No kidding.
I decided to test that, and I cleaned it up really well, just with some wet or dry sandpaper, just take the schmoo off, and I put one of my good 1, 2, 3 blocks on that side over there, and wanted to see if it rocked a little bit. And those things are definitely not flat. They were uneven. What I ended up doing was I ended up taking another 123 block, which was not so good, but flat, and using some 600 grit sandpaper. And I flattened both of these spots on the block. And when I started to do that, I could see the high spots were mainly around these holes here where the threads penetrate through, which is understandable. In this case, it distorted a little bit over the years in heat cycles and cool downs and so forth, who knows what. But I got them really flat, definitely true, and I tested them with not only that good 123 block again, but when you put these actual caps on without the O-rings in to see if they rocked. Now they're not, nice and flat. I got a little bit more crush on that O-ring. Hopefully we don't have any more problems with it, but time will tell. So we're going to go move on back to the carbs now, which I've completed all the carb bodies. I did the same exact stuff that I do when I work on somebody else's carbs. My jets are in, and then we'll rack them back up, and we'll come back when we're ready to put them on the bike. All right, folks, that's going to do it on video 2. We're getting a little long in the tooth in this video, so we're just going to go ahead and cut it off here. And we'll continue with video 3. I made a little fun at myself. I hope you kind of got the gist of that in regards to the cylinder block issue with the flatness. Obviously, it wasn't flat, and I hope you got the idea. I don't have any qualms or any problems with putting stuff in videos when I do dumb things, and that was a dumb thing, assuming that. But I'm pretty sure we got it licked right now. In fact, pretty much this is all back together. And everything's getting ready to go to the point where we're going to get it off the lift and hook it back up to the sidecar. You're going to have to see that in video 3, though, along with some carburetor work as far as reassembling. I'm going to cover some specifics, not much, just a teeny bit, on the carb reassembly and re-racking and reinstallation, that is, onto the carb holders. And then you'll see it running in that video and so forth. And then hopefully in that video we'll have a little bit of footage or shots riding it down the road full throttle, wide open throttle, see if we actually corrected the main objective here. So I guess you're just gonna have to wait for that. Now, what do you gotta do? You gotta subscribe, like, share, ring the bell. You get notified when I put more junk like this up. We've got other stuff in the pipeline, and I think you're gonna find that pretty interesting when it comes up, but more on that later. As always, thanks for watching. Don't just repair, restore. We'll catch you on next video.